Hi designers, today we are ready to start our textile or otherwise known as a surface pattern design unit. We are in essence going to be creating patterns from scratch in Illustrator. So if you want to, this extra little blurb is here, kind of will show you, give you in a nutshell what we're going to be doing, but it's not necessary that you watch that. There's a lot of vocab associated with this unit. This slide presentation, we're going to go over the bulk of these today. You will have some activities leading up to the end of the unit that's going to hopefully kind of reinforce some of these vocab terms. But the majority of them, as you see here, are color related. Yes, we have some that we're going to talk about when it comes to pattern making, but again, majority of them are on colors because we're going to start talking about color theory today. So the first definition is textile design. Textile design is closely related to surface design for pattern making because one of the largest employers of pattern makers is the textile design community. So in other words, making patterns for materials that we would think of related to fashion and or home decorations. So things like wallpaper, obviously ties, and often they will work with fashion illustrators or interior designers. This is kind of maybe give you a little appetizer of what is to come. So these are former students. These are all patterns that were created in Illustrator. You will have the option of sending off your pattern to get printed on a product of your choice at the end of this unit. So hopefully something to inspire you and motivate you to do a really good job on your pattern creation. Now we won't be doing blankets, of course. We'll have a smaller one that I pay for out of our budget, but if you want something more elaborate, I will pay for the shipping and you can pay for the product. So I'll go over that later in class. Although somewhat self-explanatory is the term pattern, but we're gonna give you a formal definition here. So pattern is a combination of elements or shapes repeated in a reoccurring or regular arrangement. Now you can see it here. You have a sequential symmetrical pattern and you have one that is non-sequential. That means you're repeating but not in a sequential way. We are focusing on the sequential pattern. So we're creating a tile that gets repeated over and over again. The term repetition is another principle of art. What are you repeating? Well, you're repeating the elements of design, line, shape, color, etc., to create unification. Typically, for us, we're going to use repetition so much that we create a pattern. So although closely related, these two terms, pattern and repetition, are not the same. You can repeat, but not to the point of creating a pattern. Pattern is when you repeat so often that there's a common occurrence of shapes that you can see an identifiable pattern emerge. Another vocab term that you need to be aware of is positive and negative space. What I would like you to do now is stop this video, find the slide presentation, and watch this short video on the principle of space as it applies to graphic design. Okay, now that you're back, you know that there's two types of space. There's positive space, which refers to the object or subject of the design, and then you have the negative space, that's the area around it. In graphic design, we often call it white space, even when it's not white. And we've talked a little bit about that Gestalt principle where the color and or value of the space, whether positive or negative, determines what your object is. So again, if we're looking at this here, if you decide that the white is the positive space, it's then a picture of a vase on a black background. But if you decide that the faces are the positive space, then your background becomes white. So the Gestalt theory has to do with that balance of positive versus negative space, and some designers like to play with that Gestalt principle where the positive and negative space will flip-flop back and forth. Most of the time though, however, it's very clear. However, in a pattern, you can play with that Gestalt theory a little bit more where that positive and negative space might be a little less clearly defined. Another term to know is geometric. Geometric pattern is simply a type of pattern made of abstract shapes, often as though made with an instrument such as a ruler or compass. So there is no recognizable object in there. It's not a repetition of apples or flowers. It's just shapes that get repeated in a certain manner, whether it's sequential or non-sequential. The term abstract, if you're not sure what that is it's, again, a pattern with no identifiable image, pure design, just shapes, lines, and colors. A motif pattern, is a pattern, so it's a repetition of an image over and over again. So it's not abstract shapes. So when you look at this pattern, you can say, oh, that's a pattern of rabbits or bunnies. This is a holiday pattern. So you're repeating a common theme throughout, whether you have a recognizable subject matter in there. All right, now we're getting into color. So you do not have to watch these. However, if you're kind of a science geek and you love this stuff, which I do, you might want to take a break and watch a little Bill Nye, the Science Guy. He breaks down color and how we see color scientifically, which is useful as a graphic designer, but it's not necessary that we know how the spectrum works in science. We, however, need to know how colors work in design in relationship to each other. That's color theory. So we don't need to know a whole lot about wavelengths and how those create color, but we do need to know about color harmony. And that's where the colors are in relationship to each other on the color wheel. So your term for color harmony, which is related to color theory, is design with a balance of two or more colors that work together. This is why we often establish a color scheme, and you will be doing that for your pattern. I would like you to stop this video now and watch the video on color theory.
Have you ever...
All right, so color scheme. Your definition for what a color scheme is they are colors grouped together based on their location on this thing here, which is the color wheel. In other words, they work well together. There's some basic ones. So a primary color scheme is red, yellow, and blue. And that's known as what's called a triadic because it's three colors on the color wheel. These colors are the ones that make up all other colors. So by mixing red and blue and yellow together, you get all of the secondary and tertiary colors. Secondary colors are going to be green, which you get by mixing blue and yellow, purple or violet, which you get by mixing blue and red, and orange, which you get from mixing red and yellow. The tertiary colors are the in-between colors. So that's the colors that's in between the secondary and the primary. And those have a much longer title. So you have tertiary such as red-orange, yellow-orange, yellow-green, blue-green, blue-purple, and red-purple. Another type of color scheme is complementary. Those are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. They have a high level of contrast because they are opposites. They can sometimes clash if you're not careful, but they're really striking next to each other. That's why a lot of sports teams will use complementary color schemes in their uniforms because they're so visually aggressive next to each other. The more common way that you'll see a complementary color scheme, especially in fashion and in interior decorating, is what's called a split complementary. So instead of taking a direct complementary scheme, so red and green, which can kind of be almost two opposite, they're going to split one of those two, and they're going to do the tertiaries on either side. So instead of using a hunter green with this red, they're going to use a blue green and a yellow green. It's just a little bit more, it's a little bit easier on the eyes than a straight up complementary color scheme. So a triadic just is a definition for any three color scheme. So there's several different types of triadic. We've actually already gone over two of those. So primary and secondary technically are a triadic color scheme because they're made with three colors. There's other ones such as warm and cool. You can also have analogous. So analogous colors are colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. Anywhere between 3 and 4 is typically what you will see in analogous. Sometimes you'll see a 2-color analogous color scheme, but usually it's 3 or 4. In design, we like odd numbers. So a lot of times you're going to see it as 3. As I said, you have warm colors, which is a triadic, red, orange, and yellow. So think of those as the colors of fire. And then your cool colors are going to be blue, green, and violet. Monochromatic, mono meaning one, it's tints and shades all of one color. So it's basically whites and blacks and grays, which is your tone, added to getting different values of that one hue. A neutral color scheme are colors that fall outside of the color wheel, so you can't find them on there. And that's brown, black, gray, and white, and all shades of those in between. So like tans would technically be a neutral color. When you're creating your patterns and you're picking your color scheme, contrast of color is really important in what's called legibility. Legibility of a pattern is the ability to see differences in color and shape so that you have good contrast. You can see here the one to the top right does not have good contrast. It has good contrast in its shapes, but it does not have enough contrast in the value or color to make it stand out. Versus here, where there's not a lot of contrast in your shape, but because of the color and the hue change and the values, you can clearly see the pattern. These are your Illustrator lessons that you're going to work through after this lecture, this at-home lecture over surface design, pattern design, and color harmonies and color theory. You're going to start first with making a geometric pattern. It is really easy to make patterns in Illustrator. And the geometric pattern tutorial is probably going to take you all of 15 minutes. It does not take long at all. You're then going to work up to a motif pattern where you're going to create a pattern of a recognizable object over and over again. But I'm going to show you how to create it with the symbols panel. So if you are somebody who doesn't feel like you can draw or paint really well, there is a way that you can use basically clip art or stock imagery that you can use in your pattern. You will then have to make sure you finish the creating and saving balanced color scheme video and the starting and completing your pattern project. This one you'll do at the end when you're ready to start your actual project. So what are we doing for your project? Well, you are creating a one-of-a-kind pattern with an established color scheme that you will pick based off of a tile that should be 100% original, meaning you have come up with the tile design on your own. Yes, you can use symbols from the symbols panel. These are symbols, but other elements should be hand-drawn in Illustrator by you, whether it's geometric shapes or some other recognizable object like hearts or leaves or something like that, that you're using your knowledge of Illustrator to show me you can actually create simple illustrations that we will then use as a pattern. So your pattern does not have to be motif-based, meaning it does not have to be pictures. It can be a geometric. But either way, when you are finished, a portion of your design should be made from scratch in Illustrator. I don't want you relying on that symbols panel 100% to create your pattern because your difficulty level grade will be low. So this is what your project is actually going to look like when you're done. So you're going to have your tile, you're going to have your one-of-a-kind pattern, you're going to have your color scheme that you chose, you created in the last video lesson, to create your pattern, and then you're going to have 3 images of possible products with this pattern applied, and we're going to use a website called Zazzle, and I show you that in that last video lesson. This one here, starting and completing your pattern project, that's where I will show you how to set up this document and how to create these images. All right? What I'm looking for is that your pattern must have a minimum of 5 colors. And I actually would say 5 colors flat. I know I say minimum. If you want to do maybe 6 or 7, but be careful because if you use too many colors, it's going to mess with your repetition, right? So 5 color scheme. It must be an original pattern. Again, it can be geometric or motif or both, which mine technically is both. There's geometric shapes and motif. And you must use that completed template form. So you're going to be starting from scratch to do this layout design, but it should be in this format. It should look like this when you are done, even though you're going to start from a flat document. So here's some past student examples. Now I will be fully honest in saying that Some of these were drawn on paper and then scanned in and then they colored. In fact, that's the way I used to do this lesson, but we're doing it slightly different now than I've done in the past. But this is my expectation. This is the quality that I'm expecting, or even better. So start using some of your knowledge of Illustrator. Show me how to use, you can use gradients, you can use drop shadows, you can do some of those more creative things. You can use the paintbrush tool, even though I haven't really gotten into it much. You can use the pen tool, any tool that you know how to use. The only thing you can't use in here is pattern swatches within a fill. And I will go over that in one of the videos. Again, much of this was hand drawn and then they just colored it in an Illustrator, which is an option we can talk about. If you're interested, let me know. So you can see here the student drew these, we scanned them in, they added color in Illustrator, and then they created an original motif out of it. And then the last of this slide presentation is just patterns to give you inspiration. Your first step before I release you to start on the tutorials of the project is you have an assignment today. Your assignment is to open up a Google Doc, and I want you to go to the internet and I want you to locate approximately 10 patterns that you like. You're going to put it on a Google Doc. I will print it for you in full color, and you are going to be pasting those down into your sketchbook that you have them there for inspiration. But the slides that I am finishing up with here today have a lot of examples of the type of pattern that I am looking for, that I'm expecting. So again, like I said, it can be geometric and abstract. It does not have to be a motif, but this is the level or use of Illustrator I'm expecting. And you really want to think about the personality and style of your pattern. So that's why I'm having you start by looking at these slides and the examples that I am putting forth, but also going to the internet to find some examples of patterns that you like. Remember, as a designer, you must look at other designers' work. That's how we learn. You are a student designer. The best way to learn is to look at others and notice how they are like using line. You're like, oh, that's cool. Or noticing that they changed the opacity so it's kind of see-through. You can do all of these effects. You can layer in, you can add little details. Things like this, patterns like this, are going to earn you a high score in your difficulty, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm not just looking for a simple repetition. Anybody can do a checkerboard pattern. That's easy. I'm looking for something more advanced. Here's some more examples here. It does not have to be filled. It can be line-based. You can do that. If the holidays are coming up, feel free to create a pattern that you can use on a product that celebrates an upcoming holiday that you really like. All right, so I'm going to release you at this time to open a Google Doc, go to the internet, and start copying and pasting, let's say a minimum of 10. If you want to do more than 10, you can. Make sure you turn that in Google Classroom, and then I will print it for you so that you can put it in your sketchbook and you can save some inspirational patterns before you start your project. Good job.